Our collective family tree has a mysterious new branch. Hi there, thanks for joining us once again for Plain English. This is episode 239 for Thursday, March 5th, and all your episode resources can be found at plainenglish.com/239. Coming up today, by analyzing the DNA of living men and women in today's West Africa, scientists have discovered genetic traces of a new branch of humanity that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. In the second half of the episode today, we'll talk about the English phrase "for the most part," and the video lesson on the website for Plus members is about how to use neither and nor together in one sentence. You've probably heard both those words, but in the video lesson, I show you how to use neither and nor together. And that's at plainenglish.com/239. Scientists have discovered a mysterious new ancestor far, far back in human history. The interesting twist is that they made this discovery not from studying fossils, but from studying the DNA of humans living in West Africa today. Our origins, the origins of the species Homo sapiens, is not a straightforward history. We have a complicated lineage, in other words. From studying fossils, it's known that Homo sapiens branched off from other hominids about 600,000 years ago. When I say branched off, I mean that a single species divided and took different evolutionary paths and eventually developed into multiple species. The Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and what became today's humans all took different evolutionary paths over several 100,000 years. The Neanderthals and Denisovans went extinct about 40,000 years ago, leaving only Homo sapiens, that's us, from the original branch. Though the three were distinct species, there is evidence that they cross-mated. In other words, they occupied some of the same land area and quite commonly mated with each other. The evidence of this lives in both fossils and in our own DNA. If, like me, you have non-African ancestors, then about 1.5 to 2.1% of your DNA is inherited from the Neanderthal species. Until recently, our knowledge of our lineage came primarily from the study of fossils. But with rapid advances in understanding DNA and the human genome, scientists are able to make discoveries about our lineage without physical fossil evidence. And that is how they found a ghost lineage, or another previously unknown species that mated with early Homo sapiens. It's called a ghost because scientists can see it's there because some modern-day humans carry traces of their DNA, but there is no physical evidence that they existed. So how did they find this? The researchers performed a statistical analysis of living human DNA, Neanderthal DNA, and Denisovan DNA. They drew human DNA from hundreds of people from a variety of African regions. For the most part, what they saw fit with our current understanding of human evolution. However, some people in the study had genetic variants that were not present in other humans, in Neanderthals, or in Denisovans. Specifically, 3 populations of West African people from parts of Nigeria and Sierra Leone have between 2 and 19% of their DNA that is not explained by our current understanding of human history or the history of other similar species. The 2 scientists think that this new ghost species interbred with humans about 50,000 years ago, about the same time that humans and Neanderthals were also interbreeding. But it's not yet clear where in the ancient family tree this new species falls. It may be a branch of another species, Homo erectus, which branched off from early humans about 1 million years ago. Fossils from the earliest humans date back 300,000 years, and archaeologists are discovering new fossils in Africa that continue to fill in gaps in our knowledge of human history. However, much of the earliest human history took place in Africa, and DNA degrades quickly in tropical climates. The next steps in this research are to sequence the genomes of more people in Africa and to perform additional testing on fossils. This is an exciting time to be studying early humans. The earliest discovery of a Denisovan bone was in 1984, but the species wasn't confirmed until 2010 after DNA testing showed that it was its own species. In the mid-2000s, a skull was discovered in Nigeria that is neither human nor Neanderthal. Further DNA testing on this skull will determine whether it belonged to this newly discovered ghost lineage. I know from Instagram that some of you have read the book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. I don't know why, but that must be the most Instagrammed nonfiction book out there in English and in other languages. Hey, life can get pretty busy sometimes, so you'd be forgiven for missing an episode now and then. If that ever happens to you, then you might like to get the episode emails that JR sends out every Monday and Thursday morning. They each have a summary of the episode, and I think this is helpful because you can read the summary before you listen. That way, you have an idea of what the episode is going to be about. Maybe you can think about it a little bit before listening in English. That's what I would do. Just read the summary ahead of time to warm up a little before listening to the episode. If you'd like to get those emails, then sign up at plainenglish.com/mail. Today's expression is for the most part. What do we mean when we say for the most part? We mean something is mostly, but not entirely true. Here's how you heard it earlier in this episode. For the most part, the scientists studying DNA samples from Africa found what they expected, but there were small populations that showed some evidence of a new species. For the most part, they found what they expected. That means most of their findings were in line with our current understanding. However, when you hear for the most part, I want you to anticipate the exception that comes after it. For the most part, they found what they expected, but, and here's the exception, they found some surprises in 3 specific populations. Now, a lot of you have kids, so you might have experience with babysitters, whether that's family members or neighborhood teenagers watching your kids for you. You might come home after date night with your spouse and ask, how did the kids behave? And maybe the babysitter says, well, for the most part, they behaved. What did I tell you to listen for next? That's right, the exception. For the most part, they behaved, but it took forever to get them to go to bed. Okay, now you have the full picture. My first car was a 1991 Honda Accord passed down from my parents. They were great cars, Hondas from that time, but they all seemed to have one problem. They all seemed to rust in the same place, right above the rear wheels. If someone asked me way back when, if someone asked me, is your car in good condition? I would have answered, yes, for the most part. There's just a little rust in the back over the wheels. Yes, it is in good condition with just a few exceptions. So yes, it is for the most part. You can also say for the most part after making your generalization. Have you ever given a presentation to a large group, either at work or in a volunteer capacity? If so, you might reflect on how the presentation went, whether your audience stayed engaged and was interested in what you were saying. You might think back and say, the audience was interested and engaged in the presentation for the most part. The only exception was when we talked about the budget for next year. They stayed engaged for the most part. You can also put it in the middle of the sentence. So here are a few examples like that. CEOs, for the most part, recognize that they need to keep their employees happy. What might be the exception to that? Well, some CEOs don't care about their employees. That's true. Other executives might only go to a small effort to keep employees satisfied. But for the most part, I think they recognize that in today's labor market, employee satisfaction is important. Here's another example. Ride-sharing is, for the most part, a benefit to society. It's great that we now have an additional form of transportation. If you want to have some drinks, you don't have to worry about driving or finding someone else to drive. It's safer and more convenient than traditional taxis. But let's be honest, there are some drawbacks to ride sharing. the drivers don't make a lot of money. It contributes to congestion on the road. Some studies show that the average speed on city roads falls when ride-sharing arrives because drivers slowly circle around waiting for rides. But for the most part, ride-sharing has been good for city dwellers. Today's song of the week is Losing My Religion by R.E.M., suggested by Ali from Istanbul. That was so popular when it came out in 1991. So popular in my town. I was about 10 years old when it came out, and that was on the radio all the time. It's a classic, Losing My Religion by the band R.E.M., and if you want to suggest a song in the future, just email jr@plainenglish.com. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us as always. The next episode is coming up on Monday, and we will see you then. If you like listening to Plain English on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, then you should know that Plain English is about a lot more than just the audio podcast. Our website has transcripts of every program. Every word I say on the program is on the website, free for all users to see at plainenglish.com. But there's another feature of the transcripts too, and that's for Plain English Plus members. In every episode, we highlight about 100 words or phrases. And if you hover your mouse over a highlighted word, then it shows you the translation into your own language. If you speak Portuguese, Spanish, Japanese, German, French, Italian, or Chinese. So if you listened to this episode and didn't know what sequence the genome means or what traces of DNA is, then you could just hover over it and see what it means in your language. It's pretty cool. And if you would like to try it out, if you'd like to see a full sample episode with these translations, then you can visit plainenglish.com/sample, SAMPLE, plainenglish.com/sample. I think you'll like it.